Yo, yo, yo. What's up, everybody? We are back. It's Actuali Podcast. I'm Chris,
I'm DJ.
and today we are covering another episode of John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. It's Meaning Making 101, fam. And in this series, we are learning how to cultivate wisdom in our lives. We're learning how to overcome the meaning crisis that is wrapping around this world and causing so much social division, breakdown. Signs of civilizational breakdown are on the horizon, and everybody's seeing it now. It's one of those times where people are less sure about the future than ever before, and we're experiencing greater and greater senses of meaninglessness and hopelessness and all of those kinds of things that come about when you start to chop out the sense of the sacred out from underneath yourself as a culture, which it seems that we've been doing. We have lost our connection to the sacred. So this series that John Vervaeke has shared with us, we're on episode 44 now of a 50 lecture series. So we're almost done. It's incredible. I can't believe we've made it this far. And thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. Let me get us live on Facebook and stop talking here for a moment.
Gotta look after our Facebook viewer.
Yeah, we do. That right? Facebook viewer.
Excuse me.
Go live. All I had to do was press the button the whole time. Oh, man. What's up, Facebook fam? We are back. It's Actuali Podcast with another episode of Meaning Making 101. We were just talking about how important this series is to humankind at this time, at this point in history, and how we can indeed help ameliorate the sense of meaninglessness and help usher in an awakening from the meaning crisis. And that's what we're here to do. We're on episode 44 of a 50 lecture series, guys. This episode's on theories of wisdom, and our last episode was on wisdom and virtue. So I guess we could do a quick recap of our last episode. We're going to do a shorter synopsis than we normally do, just to keep the podcast from running too long. So let's go ahead and do that.
So there is some theories to wisdom. We discussed Schwartz and Sharp in a paper they published in 2006, regardless of the name of the paper. We're looking at virtue as a form of excellence, not as how things are broken down into their pieces, but how they excel past the norm, right? So we're not looking at virtues as a feature list, which would imply the maximization of any one virtue. We need a schema, so we're going to try to create a schema of the virtues, because you need to optimize them. If you're too honest, then you're an asshole. If you're not honest enough and you're just trying to spare someone's feelings, you might end up harming them worse. So we're looking at the virtues as interdependent pieces of perhaps the same thing, perhaps not. So like there's the story of the bride, how do I look? Well, you don't tell, the bride completely honestly, but you have to be honest enough so she doesn't look foolish when she's on stage, okay? Or like grading somebody's paper. If you're too accurate on their grading, maybe you're going to stunt their forward progress. So maybe morally you feel like you need to give them a little bit more. But when does that giving them a little bit more go from pushing them further and make them feel good about it to stunting them and then thinking they're doing all right? All right. So the morals or virtues are clearly not separate. So and moving on, and you can't put rules to virtues either, so like, just be kind. Well, that's not specific enough, be kind like I would be to my lover, be kind like I would be to a stranger, to like my kid, to my dog. It's different ways of being kind, and rules aren't specific enough to cover. So the idea is we need a higher order ability that deals with wisdom. Let's see. So there's the Aristotle's distinction of, wisdom. You have Sophia and Phronesis, and the way that these two fellas, what was their name again?
Is it Peterson and Seligman?
No, Schwartz and Sharp. Okay,
you're already
so
on the Schwartz and Sharp.
I'm way down the list. So Schwartz and Sharp kind of left out Sophia because they assigned, or they thought it was the rules dimension, like it's theoretical and it's only rules, whereas phronesis is your practical wisdom. So they focused on the practical. And yeah, because if we go too far into Sophia, their fear would be we replace wisdom with laws, and then we'd just be legislating everything. And there's two questions. Do the legislations do good by us, but then do they do no harm? Or the second question we should ask is do these legislations stop us from wanting to move further into wisdom, right?
That's right, because we can confuse having laws for instilling virtues
Yeah.
or cultivating wisdom. There needs to be a balance. Will legislation will reduce the harm, or will it make people less likely to pursue wisdom and cultivate wisdom?
Yeah.
Cultivate
So
their wisdom.
they think that phronesis. So phronesis is context sensitive, right? But we need the Sophia for the awareness of the context still. So what Vervaeke is arguing, you can't just throw Sophia out and only
That's
go into phronesis.
Yeah.
Because you need to be context specific and general.
That's right.
And Schwartz,
You need something that you can utilize that can be context sensitive in a generalizing manner, such as wisdom. So each of the virtues are kind of like a different aspect of wisdom in that moment.
Yeah.
So sometimes you need to be kind, sometimes you need to be courageous, sometimes you need to be honest, sometimes you need to be compassionate with how you use your language, and so on and so forth.
And so we talked about expertise and how that's kind of flawed because expertise is a know-how in a specific context, right? But we need to be sensitive to all contexts, right? So we need both.
So we need to get both in an oppositional relationship, basically.
Yeah.
That healthy kind of oppositional, calibrating style, focusing kind of relationship.
Yeah. So what Vervaeke's arguing is,
and that's what our relevance realization is always doing for us.
Yeah.
Right? Sorry to interrupt there.
So what Vervaeke's arguing is phronesis is not expertise per se, but being sensitive in multiple contexts.
Yes.
So we need a domain of general ability to be context sensitive. So we need to stay away from foolishness.
That's right.
So Boltz and Staudinger, sorry, the Berlin, so the seminal
Staudinger, yeah.
Basically a seminal paper on like trying to scientifically find what is wisdom. And so they basically developed, this is a lot, but they basically developed certain criteria for what makes somebody wise.
That's right.
Yeah. And
the pragmatic aspects of language and the pragmatism of language they looked at. So what is pragmatic wisdom, for instance?
And then they brought up, so one is, the first thing you need a rich fundamental knowledge of the fundamental pragmatics of life, right?
Yeah.
And then you need the procedural knowledge of the fundamental pragmatics of life. And then what they're calling lifespan contextualism, which is seeing the big picture and seeing the little picture, and that's the perspectival.
Right.
There's a bit of an issue with this term, relativism of values and priorities. And the reason why is, the term relativism of, it's like all these great thinkers, they weren't moral relativists. And we have a tendency to be very much moral relativists in this period of time, thinking that, and he's not dismissing these values, but say liberal Western values is not the font of wisdom. He's not dismissing the values, but it's not where you go find wisdom.
They're a result of wisdom applied in particular cultural context and historic context.
So
wisdom's a meta-heuristic. That is a meta-heuristic pragmatic to orchestrate mind and virtue towards excellence.
Yeah, so within this relativism of values, you need fallibilism, which is never expressing certainty, and then humility, which is a recognition of and application of your status, limitations, all those things.
Yes.
And then the fifth is a recognition and management of uncertainty. So basically doing the best you can within the context of everything being uncertain. So those criteria are what really are criteria that you can measure, you can apply, you can create tests for to see, say who is more wise, or has good judgment for wisdom. So there was an experiment where using these, testing who has good wisdom, And then the next thing they did, they had another experiment where they had group one would talk to another person about.
They gave them a question.
Yeah, about a question.
And they said, so the first group, they told them, you're allowed to talk to somebody like a loved one.
Yeah, and then the
second group, you're allowed to imagine.
Just imagine
talking to somebody.
And then the third group was only given more time to think. And what ended
they were never even told about the idea that they could imagine talking to someone else.
No,
they were just given said, okay, you guys have more time to think.
Yeah. So what they ended up finding is group one and group two both did way better on figuring out the problem. And then also the first test, taking the test, how good they take the test, it changed that. And this shows that we need each other for wisdom, not just time to think about it. But, and whether or not the person is real or just in your head too. So you can simulate it as well within yourself.
Yeah, we're really good at simulating other people inside of ourselves. So internalizing another person's personality so that you can dialogue with them when you're confronting a complex, difficult issue, it's incredibly helpful. It actually helps you develop the wisdom that you need to make the best decision you can in that situation.
And they call it the Solomon effect, having the third person effect inside your own head of bouncing something off of somebody else.
So like the idea of what would Jesus do? Or what would Socrates or Buddha do, depending on your philosophical background or whatever you're interested in. And you can internalize someone that you find is very wise, learn a lot about them, and then you can internalize them even better, and they can be something really helpful to bounce off inside your own mind. And because we find that humans are smarter in groups than they are individually, it's the same with wisdom. We are wiser in groups than we are individually, and we can even at least do a virtual person in our head, and it's better than just trying to figure something out with your own individual perspective. Let's say taking on another person's perspective widens your total awareness, widens your perception. That's why compassion is so useful in life.
Widens your perception and increases your ability to find things salient.
Yes. So you're seeing from other people's perspectives. You're putting yourselves in other people's shoes. The more that you're able to be compassionate and open up to other people's points of views, the wider total awareness that you have to understand this world around you. So this is really, really helpful. Unconditionality, like Jesus taught, is the ultimate posture or orientation that a human being can take in order to enact wisdom in this world, make the best decisions, and apply themselves in the optimal way, even in physical circumstances. You put yourself into the flow state to play ball or to climb a mountain or what have you.
So that's all I have for
the
recap. There's a lot of stuff left out of there, but between what we just did and what he's going to do, and then just sometimes I have to go back and watch previous episodes to gather things because it's like terms.
It's really helpful to do that. And if you guys are enjoying this episode, please do go ahead and look up John Vervaeke, learn more about him, like and subscribe to his channel. And you can look up Mark Mulvey, who took notes on every single episode of this series. His notes are immaculate. They're excellent. They'll be very helpful for you in understanding everything, because it's hard to get everything on the first pass sometimes. It helps to rewatch some parts of these if you're having trouble. But he does such a good job of reiterating and returning to previous concepts that you do eventually gain enough of a gestalt, you could say, the total.
The total that is more than the sum of its parts.
You will get what he's pointing to at the very least.
You got to love the Germans. They have a word for that, not just the total of things.
And we're here to learn with you guys. So if you have questions, ask us in the chat. Feel free to throw your comments down. It really helps the algorithm too. So if you guys like, you share, you subscribe, those things help a lot. Commenting on any of these videos helps even more. It's the ultimate thing to do to help this algorithm get some juice and push us out there. We'd really like to be able to reach more people, to help invite more people into this process. And, we're right here with you guys. We're not, some great wise teachers above you all. We're just fellow human beings here along the path, learning from somebody wiser than ourselves and welcoming you into that process. So welcome, everybody.
We're not wise men, even though sometimes we're wise guys.
True that. We are wise guys sometimes.
Yeah, I've been called a wise guy since I was a teenager.
Right?
Oh, yeah, wise guy.
I got to throw a screen up here for us real fast.
We got to do a screen thing. Yeah, we got a new camera and had to figure that out. Had some latency issues and all that stuff. So we're like getting in by the skin of our teeth on this one. And also, it looks a little funny for right now, but we got to figure out the white balance and everything into that camera's guts and figure out what, all those settings. But, you can see us clearly now.
I don't know why it's not showing up.
Oh, no.
Oh, well. Anyways, we're going to jump right into it, guys. So here we go. This is episode 44 of John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. Big bow. Yeah, it's not showing up, but it will here.
Welcome back to Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. So last time we took a look at the theory of Schwartz and Sharp, and that was an important theory for linking wisdom to virtue and positive psychology, and we saw the deep connections between wisdom and the cultivation and practice of virtue. We made some criticisms of Schwartz and Sharp. I argued that they should include Sophia and not just phronesis. If you remember those, they were invoking Aristotle's two notions of wisdom and giving priority to phronesis. I think you need both, as Aristotle argued, Sophia and phronesis in order to be virtuous. I also argued that their attempt to explain phronesis with expertise, I think, was confused, and we should put that aside. And then we took from that some ideas about the developmental aspect. That's of course central to Aristotle. Remember, he brought the developmental dimension to wisdom, and how much wisdom is becoming a virtuous person. Other things I think are lacking in the theory, and we'll come back to this, that there wasn't much discussion about the connection between wisdom and meaning in life. But we then passed to taking a look at a theory that took very seriously the connection between wisdom and virtue, and this is the seminal theory and work of Baltz and Staudinger. We took a look at the idea of the meta-heuristics, pragmatics, right, for orchestrating mind and virtue and excellence, and they talked about the fundamental pragmatics of life. I pointed out to you that a way making sense conjointly of the invocation of meta-heuristics and both senses of pragmatics is this idea of that its core to wisdom is this capacity for relevance realization, obviously improved in some fundamental way, which I think means that there's integral connections between wisdom and intelligence via the notion of rationality that we've already been developing together. And then we took a look at the 5 criteria. There was clear invocations of propositional knowledge, procedural knowledge. The contextualism, I argued, can best be seen as perspectival knowing. I argued against their notion of relativism and argued instead for humility and fallibilism. And then, obviously, I think that's sorry, that was maybe too harsh to them. I think it's pretty clear that many of the seminal figures of wisdom figures from the past were not moral relativists or relativists in any significant way. So I strongly recommend replacing relativism with fallibilism and humility. And then finally, the 5th criteria is that wisdom is applicable to domains in which there is uncertainty. And of course, as I've already argued, that's a huge aspect of our life and our cognition because of ill-definedness, combinatorial explosion, et cetera, which again means relevance realization is being strongly presupposed. I want to give you some further quotes to indicate what's going on about that. So they talk about wisdom having to do with generativity, flexibility, and efficiency in application. And of course, the generativity, but the flexibility, but also the efficiency are bringing together many of the ideas that we've been talking about with relevance realization. They talk about it taking place, listen to this language, within the frame of bounded rationality. They're invoking the notion here from Simon of bounded rationality. This is rationality that is taking place within a framing, it's taking place within the constraints of combinatorial explosion, within the constraints of working with ill-definedness. It's a notion of rationality deeply enmeshed with relevance realization. They talk about these are all quotes I'm giving you, by the way, highly complex sets of information about the meaning and conduct of life are highly complex, okay, are reduced quickly listen to this, to their essentials without being lost in the never-ending process of information search. Notice that combinatorial explosion directly being invoked here, that were to occur if wisdom was treated as a case of unbounded rationality. So I think it's pretty clear from all of those quotes that they are directly invoking the machinery of relevance realization. I pointed out that they, with their criteria, they were able to begin the operationalization of wisdom, and some of the first experimental work. They found that, a cognitive style in which one had excellent skills of judgment seemed to be predictive of the ability to do well in the experiments. They also found that discussing with another person or imagining discussing with another person enhanced your capacity for wisdom, challenging an individualistic notion of rationality, going back to Descartes and assumed, if you remember, by Cohen in his arguments. And but what's really interesting about that is, of course, this brings up the relevance of Platonic dialogue, but also the Stoic idea of internalizing the sage, because the case where people imagine talking to a significant other was just as efficacious as actually talking to a significant other, and both of those were more efficacious than just giving more time to think and reflect on your own. I pointed out that one plausible explanation for why this works is that you're getting something like what Igor Grossman has shown with the Solomon effect, that the move to take the perspective of other people, move to a third-person perspective, really enhances I'm sorry, I'm going to have to get a drink. I seem to have something caught in my throat. Really enhances one's ability to overcome the transparency and the bias induction of one's own perspective. And that, right, can be facilitated, of course, if you not only are taking the perspective of somebody who's present, but you can do that by simulating them internally, and eventually you could internalize that perspective the way we talked about with the Stoics, internalizing Socrates. And one can learn to, remember this, one can learn to converse with oneself, dialogue with oneself, do something like enlinkis with oneself and provoke aporia, provoke the challenge and the demand for transformative change. So I think all of this is really excellent work on their part. I noted that they also, like Schwartz and Sharp, I think make the mistake of trying to understand wisdom in terms of expertise, and I'm not going to repeat that argument, and I think that it is a kind of fundamental mistake. I think understanding wisdom on the lines of something like rationality is a much more fruitful connection. Now, what are some further criticisms of Balt and Staudinger? I think one of the most important criticisms I would make, other than the ones I've made about expertise and not being very clear on explicating the role of perspectival knowing, that's kind of an unfair criticism because it's anachronistic, but we should at least endeavor to bring that into our account of wisdom, given their own experiment and given the further work of Igor Grossman. I would also say that one of my criticisms, and this is a criticism that I made with Leo Ferraro in the 2013 article we published on wisdom, I would argue that there's a mistake here at a more theoretical and conceptual level. It's a mistake of omission, not commission. What we're getting here is a product theory of wisdom, in which what you're trying to do is to come up with sort of the account of what wisdom is. And that's a valuable thing. You should definitely do that. You should try and come up with, not just a feature list, of course. That's a little bit of a problem with just the list of criteria, of course. But what you do is you want to come up with, what am I going to do? I'm going to find wise people, or I'm going to get sort of, widely shared definitions of wisdom and try and come up with an account of what wisdom is based on that. And that's a legitimate thing to do. It omits something that's very important, though. It omits what we saw as so central to the ancient theories of wisdom that we were looking at. Right? If you look at Plato, even Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and the Stoics, and if you look at the Buddha, right? And the centrality of transformational change in wisdom is being lost in a product theory. What you also need, and these two should talk to each other, you need a process theory. You need a theory, and this is what I think the ancient theories of wisdom are. You basically are, what you're getting is an account that works something like this in a process theory. You have an independent account of what is foolishness, right? And what is flourishing. And then what a process theory tells me is how I can overcome foolishness and how I can afford flourishing. And then from that, it tries to derive what wisdom is. And I think this is a very important thing to do, to try and figure out what wisdom is from an account of how one becomes wise. Because first of all, it taps into this long-standing and important philosophical heritage. So there's a tremendous legacy that we've explored in this course that we should be making use of. And secondly, it does something that I think is much clearer than what a product theory does, which is it picks up on the central insight that McGee and Barber talked about, which is seeing through illusion and into reality. The process theory gives you an account of what self-deception is and how you can see through it and into reality so that you can be better connected to yourself, to other people, to the world, and thereby flourish. So I would advocate that in addition, not in competition, but complementary to a product theory, we should be developing a process theory. Tells us what foolishness is, how foolishness develops, how we can overcome foolishness, how we can afford flourishing, and then on the basis of that, get into a dialogue with accounts of what wisdom is. So I think that's important. I mean, the fact that Aristotle is being invoked really says we need to bring in the developmental and transformative aspects of wisdom in a more serious manner. So that's one of my most central criticisms of Bolton-Stoniger. The other one, like I said, is they seem to make a mistake around expertise. I would now like to share with you some central criticisms made by a really seminal thinker, somebody I've had the chance to meet a couple times and interact with, and this is Monica Ardelt. I think she did something really important. The critique she published of Bolton-Stoniger in 2004 and her ongoing work. She's generated one of the wisdom scales that is used experimentally. She's generated a lot of experimental work. Monica's work is really important and central. Now, I'm going to use some of my language that we've developed in this course to talk about Monica, and I hope it's not imposing on her, but I think it's plausible that it's not. Her main criticism of the Bolton-Stoniger paradigm or approach is they confuse, this is her criticism and I agree with it, they're confusing having theoretical knowledge about wisdom with being a wise person. So there's a sense in which there's a bit of a modal confusion going on in the Bolton-Stoniger theory. It's like, I have a lot of knowledge about wisdom, that doesn't make me wise. So I'm an excellent case in point of that, I would think. I mean, I've read a lot of the wisdom literature, both the philosophical and the psychological. I teach on it. I'm involved with currently some experimental work, etc. So I think I have quite a bit of theoretical knowledge about wisdom. I would not in any way dare to equate that with the claim that I'm a wise person. While that knowledge, I think, could be argued to be necessary, I think what Ardelt is clearly pointing to is that it's nowhere near sufficient. It's nowhere near sufficient. And so what I think she's pointing to is the fact that a wise person, and we can think of the Socratic example here about the truth and the transformative relevance needing to be kept together. The wise person must realize these theoretical truths within a process of self-transformation, must realize this within a process of self-transformation. So people that are wise have gone through a process of self-transformation. They have achieved a significant kind of self-transcendence that allows them to embody and enact these truths rather than just having them in a propositional fashion. So Ardelt is clearly pointing towards something missing, right? The importance of the process of development. She's also importantly pointing to the way in which wisdom is a project of, becoming a particular kind of person, and so she, right, a particular kind of person living in a particular kind of world, right, and so she's directly pointing towards what I've articulated in this course as participatory knowing. So she then brings out something very important about this distinction. She makes use this distinction between having knowledge and being wise, and she makes use of a distinction from a really important philosopher, John Keats. I've mentioned him before. Done some important work on moral wisdom and its relationship to virtue. And Keats makes a very important distinction between descriptive knowledge and interpretive knowledge. Which Monica points to. And what Ardelt is pointing to is, of course, that wisdom has to do more with this. So descriptive knowledge is basically your knowledge that, the cat is a mammal, your knowledge that the cat is a predator, or something like that. Interpretive knowledge is your ability, right, to grasp the significance of your descriptive knowledge. Now that's going to be important because that actually turns out to be a central feature in most of the theories that are now being developed about what understanding is and how it differs from knowledge. And I think what Ardelt is pointing to here by invoking Keats' notion of interpretive knowledge, right, is the centrality of understanding to wisdom. And of course, grasping the significance is putting us, I'm going to argue later that this, of course, is going to have to do with construal, and this is going to have to do about, of course, with relevance realization. Now, I think that's very important work, and I think the fact that there's so much happening in this series, and the thing is, it's happening in a very sort of concise fashion. So let's gather what we've got here. We've got the realization that we shouldn't be just talking about having knowledge about wisdom. We should be going through the process of self-transcendence by which we become wise. That involves, right, as I said, a process theory. We're going to need a process theory, not just a product theory. And that what the wise person has above and beyond knowledge, I would call descriptive knowledge, and interpretive knowledge. Whether that's knowledge, I don't know. But that's at least what many people are considering understanding, and this has to do, as I'm going to argue, with that I'm going to argue that grasping the significance of your knowledge is good construal that realizes what's relevant. So Ardelt then talks about the personality characteristics that you should see in the wise person. So she thinks that if we want to talk about what it is to be a wise person, we shouldn't just be talking about the knowledge, obviously. We should be talking about the kind of characteristics that the wise person has. And that's important because we've already seen the deep connections between wisdom and virtue. So she thinks that there are three ways in which we can judge the relative value, we can grasp the significance of our knowledge. There's three domains That's not right. I don't want to say domain. There's 3 dimensions of our personhood that are crucial for being a wise person. She thinks they're, and up until now, we've been clearly giving these emphasis. There are cognitive factors. Right? So what are the cognitive factors here? This, of course, is your ability to have a comprehension of the significance and meaning of information. Okay, and not just theoretically. The significance of the information for your development, for your going through a process of self-transcendence and becoming a wise person. Then there are reflective, and I think the distinction here, this is picking up a bit on the way rationality has this reflective component into it, as opposed to intelligence, which is just your ability to grasp what's relevant. So I think that's something that can be integrated quite well with the discussion we had on rationality. So the reflective factors, a person who has been cultivating wisdom is multi-perspectival. They're capable, excuse me, I don't know what's wrong with my throat. They're capable of engaging in multiple perspectives. They're capable of self-examination, self-awareness, self-insight. So notice again that the reflection here has an existential import. You're taking these perspectives, but you can ultimately, internalize this perspectival ability onto yourself in self-reflection, self-examination, self-insight. So I think that's very valuable. And then there's an affective component. And I'm doing this because Ardelt clearly thinks that these 3 are mutually influencing, mutually constraining, causally interacting with each other. So the affective dimension, she talks about in terms of compassion. I've made a case because of some of the models she's invokes from Buddhism, I don't think this is inappropriate. I've made a case that the capacity for agape is the best way of understanding compassion. The main idea here is, and this is why I'm invoking agape as opposed to either philia or eros, is because it helps to overcome egocentrism. And you can see how these 2 are working together, right? This is helping to overcome egocentrism in kind of a powerful way. So this is sort of overcoming egocentrism perspectivally, and this is overcoming egocentrism attitudinally, and in terms of your core motivations, your core set of priorities and preferences, basically the way in which you're caring about the world, and that your caring is directed towards the flourishing of other persons. So I think that also is an important improvement in the theorizing. The fact that Ardelt is clearly giving equal priority to cognitive, I would call, these are perspectival, and the perspectival aspects of rationality, and of course the important affective things. And if you remember, this does something also, at least implicitly, that we don't have in the Baltzen-Staudinger. And so this is one other criticism I would make on behalf of Monica Ardelt of the Baltzen-Staudinger theory, which is agape, starts to, I've argued, so I'm not attributing this argument to Ardelt, but I'm supplementing it to her theory, because what agape gives is, it at least gives a way of trying to talk about meaning in life, the way Wolff talked about it. And I argued that agape helps us to get that kind of connectedness and caring that is so central to grounding meaning in life. We don't have to ground meaning in life in being subjectively attracted to something that's completely objectively attractive. We just have to be transjectively coupled to those things we find inherently valuable because of their connection to meaning making, coherence, right, and caring. And so this allows, well, what it affords, and I would argue enables our Delt's theory to do, is to connect her account of wisdom to meaning in life in a much more direct fashion. That connection to meaning in life is not clear in Baltz and Staudinger. And if you remember, Wolff argues that you can't reduce meaning in life to morality. So the connection between wisdom and virtue, while central and being discussed well by Schwartz and Sharp and by Baltz and Staudinger, is, right, not reducible to, it's not sufficient for the connection between wisdom and meaning in life. By bringing in this affective component and the idea that we are becoming wise, not just thinking about wisdom, and so the process of identification, the modal existential aspects, our Delt is doing a lot more about connecting wisdom to meaning in life. And I think that's very, very important. Okay, so this is sort of understanding in a sense I'm going to help develop later, right? But this ability to pick up on what, to realize the significance of your knowledge and allow you, and again, in an existential fashion, not just abstract theoretical, but in a way that allows you to, I would argue, ultimately see through illusion and into reality so that you can afford your development. Then that is connected to your reflective capacity, your perspectival knowing, which ultimately could be linked to the stuff we saw with Grossman's work and in the Berlin paradigm of Baltz and Staudinger, right? The ability to take the perspective of others, being multiple perspectival, and ultimately turn that back on oneself in self-examination, internalize it, right, in self-insight, and that those two are also linked to something like a capacity for agape. And I would argue that you need these two for overcoming egocentrism, and it also, I haven't seen Monica develop this very explicitly in connection, especially with Wolff's work, but there's the real potential here of connecting wisdom to something other than virtue. It should be connected to virtue, but it should also be importantly connected to meaning in life.
Okay, break time.
Yeah, so
what's up, everybody? I hope you guys are enjoying this so far.
I'm sorry we're a little green. I checked in on the live stream. We're a little green. It's okay.
We're a little green.
We'll fix things.
Yeah.
Bring that green back.
Now
it turns us purple. Oh no.
-2 or -4?
Let's go ahead and say -2.
Let's just do -2 for now.
All right. It ain't easy being green. All right. So
nah, man.
We started off with John's critique of Staudinger. The first one was the issue with the word expertise, but the big issue that he brought up this round was there was a mistake at the theoretical level. Let's see.
The criticism.
It's a product theory, which is like a feature list or a list of accounts.
Yeah,
it omits the central.
We got to bring understanding of perspectival knowing into wisdom, which we've learned about in previous episodes. So there is that mistake of the omission at the also a mistake of omission at the theoretical level.
Yeah, omission. So, but basically,
so it's not purposeful, is what he's saying. It's like
well, and it doesn't account for the transformative change that you go through.
Yes. So a product theory, just a feature list of what wisdom is, does not tell us. The idea of transformational change is lost in this product theory. So you think of people like Jesus, Plato, and Buddha, and what they taught us, how to self-transcend. This aspect needs to be a part of the understanding of wisdom. So humans are still trying to understand exactly what wisdom is and how it operates in the brain. We need to know this, because if we don't figure this out, then the AI that we're developing, intelligence without wisdom to guide it, is going to be a million times more dangerous than.
So what Vervaeke's arguing is we also we need a product theory and we need a process theory.
Yes, so we need a process theory.
So an account of how one becomes wise.
Exactly, To account for the self-deception, how we're able to see through illusion to more
reality.
optimally understand reality. So we need to bring in developmental and transformational processes.
Yeah, and not in a conflicting or competing way, but in addition to.
Yeah.
So we were introduced with
Monica
Ardelt in her criticism of Baltanass's, I'll just call him BNS right now because I can't remember names. Stallinger's argument. She felt that they were confusing having theoretical knowledge of wisdom with being wise. So knowledge of wisdom is not necessarily sufficient to becoming wise. And like what Vervaeke was saying, he has a lot of knowledge on the processes and what wisdom looks like and all the components of it, but wouldn't dare call himself wise. And not for any lack of his knowledge or anything, but yet again it's the process of transcending
how well one can embody and
yeah.
enact. And he has been doing, I think, a pretty good job of enacting it for us as well as he can. And actually, I think he does a tremendous job of doing that. But he does make a great point there. A wise person must be able to realize these truths about themselves and life through a process of self-transformation, and then learned more about them through the enacting of them. So he brings in Keeks.
Yeah, so
his moral work on moral wisdom and virtue and the distinction between descriptive and interpretive knowledge.
Yeah, and so like your interpretive knowledge would be understanding the significance of your descriptive knowledge.
Yes, the ability to grasp the significance of your own descriptions. And the description is literally something like a cat is a mammal, right?
Yeah.
Or a cat is a predator. So
or that's a tiger, and then
that's a dangerous
interpretive
cat.
is
that's
like
significant.
That might eat me and might eat my kids.
So the interpretive is the ability to grasp the significance of the description.
So Ardelt then talks about the personality characteristics of a wise person in 3 ways to gauge the significance of knowledge. The first is, well, the cognitive factors, your comprehension of the significance of meaning for the development of self-transcendence. And then you have the reflective factor, which is the multi-perspectival, self-examining, taking something from outside and bringing it in.
Capacity for self-awareness, ability to take on multiple perspectives.
And then there's the affective components, and he's saying this is compassion, agape, the love that makes persons out of just the constituent, because so you have the nature of something, and then you have an instance of that nature, and then you have I forget what the word comes from, but persopa is the personhood of that thing. So it's like, I have the nature of a pen, and then I can have multiple instances of that nature. Neither of those are the person.
Yeah, so like a cat, it has the nature of a cat, but
then there's that cat.
That cat has that kind of personality.
Well, and that cat, and then on top of it, and then using the term person to mean something like face, if you will, not just mask, but face. Really gives them a face you can look at and identify with, and kind of end. So this agape really helps us overcome our egocentrism within by using the cognitive factors and the reflective factors, and
this is the agape kind of love, which is the unconditional kind of love, like the kind that Jesus tried to teach us.
Parental or familial,
the kind of love one has for their own child. That's right.
And so John,
it's like a selfless kind of love, truly unconditional.
And then John's last critique of BNS is, which is not clear. Agape is not clear, and the fact that it helps ground us into life and meaning is not necessarily clear in their, what would you call it, in their examination of what wisdom is.
That's right, and we definitely need this. So I'm glad that he brings up Monica Ardelt, because these 3 ways to grasp the significance or understand the relative value of the dimensions of personhood required for wisdom, it's really helpful. And the characteristics, the fact that we should talk about what characteristics a wise person has, not just the knowledge they've accumulated, but what characteristics, how do they carry themselves? Because agape, this unconditionality, it helps us overcome egocentrism. It's an effective way of expressing ourselves and engaging with the meaning and basically engendering meaning in life, a deeper sense of connectedness with what matters the most to us in a good, healthy way, and it grounds us in that meaningfulness.
And I guess, like, wisdom isn't necessarily something that you have that you do nothing with. I don't think it would be wise to do nothing with it.
That's right.
The act of helping others,
that's a really good way to say it.
Go past and go beyond is the wise thing to do.
Yeah.
That's why it's like, the wisest people are always sharing, what they know, how they know, really trying to, like the wise
They're
teacher
trying to enact
wants
change
to help their students really grow through it.
They really care.
Yeah,
so this
change,
is the affective component of ways to grasp significance, understand relative value, the dimensions of personhood required for wisdom. It shows up in how one cares and directs their caring towards the flourishing of others. So agape, it connects us to meaning in life, but we can't reduce this understanding of meaning in life or the affective aspect of how we grasp significance to morality alone, to the knowledge of morals and what's good. The mere knowledge and having a sense of morality is one thing, but the ability to act on that morality in your everyday life, that's the real key. So it needs to not just be ideas of what wisdom is, but knowledge of it through practice.
Yeah, and
participatory knowledge. You gained it through participation.
Yeah, and being able to use the virtues in their proper amounts when you need it. Like, particularly with morals, it's like, like, say, a moral like killing is bad, yeah? But if somebody's coming to kill you and yours for no reason other than killing you and yours, well, you go ahead and kill him back.
Right.
The wise warrior will understand the difference between, a war of aggression and a war of defense, if you will, because we have so many stories about that. These are just wisdom stories, really. The hero's journey is just a wisdom story.
They really are. They're just there to help instill us with wisdom.
Yeah.
Well, fam, I think that catches us up so far. We're about halfway through here. So let's go ahead and ride this downhill slope. And we will see you guys at the end of this episode.
What are some of my criticisms of Ardelt's work? It clearly invokes transformational processes. It doesn't really incorporate a theory of transformative experience or an account of it, like we have in L.A. Paul's work. It doesn't really give us a processing theory. It points towards and this is important, it points towards the need for a processing theory, but it doesn't give us an account of what that process looks very much like. And it doesn't have an independent account of foolishness. It doesn't really tell us very much what foolishness is, and that's something needed if we're going to, I would argue, to have a good process theory of wisdom. There is an untapped potential. This isn't so much a criticism as encouragement that there's an untapped potential, given this theoretical machinery, of connecting wisdom to meaning in life in a way that complements the connections between wisdom and virtue. So I think these are all some very important features about this. I've already indicated, grasping the significance. I think this points towards RR. We've already talked a lot about agape and the relationships I tried to draw between it and relevance realization. And of course, I've already indicated this is bringing in the recursive aspects. It's bringing in perspectival knowing. And there's also, at least in the background sense, the participatory knowing, because one is coming to know oneself differently as one is coming to know the world differently, because one is going through this inherent transformational process. So we're seeing how the theory of wisdom is sort of building up. It's becoming more complex. It's bringing in different aspects, different kinds of knowing. There is, quite important aspects of relevance realization in Schwartz and Sharp, clearly in Baltz and Steininger, quite strongly implied in the central role, at least in the cognitive aspects, although I would argue also in the reflective and the affective aspects of Ardelt's theory. Relevance realization is playing an important role. And we can see how it's getting we see how it's getting sort of developed and specified into and connected to other important cognitive processes. All right. I think the next important theory we should turn to is Sternberg. So, and this is because you can see Sternberg's work running throughout the history. Robert Sternberg's work running through the history of the psychology of wisdom. Robert Sternberg basically really gets this off the ground with his pivotal work, not only in his own theories, but the tireless work he's done in putting together anthologies, various anthologies on wisdom or related anthologies on foolishness. Why Smart People Can Be So Stupid is one of the best anthologies on the psychology of foolishness I've seen. Right. He's also been tireless in trying to connect the psychology of wisdom to pedagogy. He gets, right, again, something that is important and central, and we see it crucially in the ancient theories of wisdom. It's not so clearly present in the current psychological theories, but the deep connection between wisdom and teaching, that's of course clearly the case in Socrates. It's clearly the case in Jesus of Nazareth. It's clearly the case in Buddhism, that there, like in the work of the Buddha, that there's a deep connection between wisdom and education. And so he's been very tireless, not only sort of theoretically pointing out that connection, but trying to work out, if you'll allow me, I mean this word in a complimentary sense, trying to engineer some psychotechnology, sets of practices for how to bring the cultivation of wisdom into the educational domain. So, so for many reasons, Sternberg is a pivotal figure in the wisdom, I was going to call it the wisdom industry. That sounds like an industry for producing wisdom. In the community of people who are endeavoring to come up with a psychological, cognitive scientific, even neuroscientific theory of wisdom. There are some people who are pursuing this. Meeks and Jest are one. Other people are pursuing the neuroscientific aspects, but I'm not going to go into that in great detail right now. I'm trying to concentrate on the psychological theories precisely because they are the ones that are most directly accessible and relevant to trying to respond to the meaning crisis. So in 1998, Sternberg, he had an earlier theory where he was talking, and he's come back to this many times. He has a book where he tries to talk about the relationships between intelligence, wisdom, and creativity. And I'm trying to follow that up in my own way, trying to show you the relationships between intelligence, rationality, wisdom, insight, etc. So definitely influenced by Sternberg in that way. But he then came up with a more I want to be complimentary of the newer theory without being completely dismissive of the older. I would say the newer theory is sort of more coherent, more tightly integrated, more explicated. So in 1998, he came up with what he's called and maintained a balanced theory of wisdom. That's actually the title of the 1998 article, a balanced theory of wisdom. So the notion of balance is going to play a crucial role in this theory. Now, Sternberg starts by talking about Sophia and phronesis and episteme, which is at the core of epistemological. That's what I would call propositional knowledge. He calls it scientific understanding. He quickly drops that as not being particularly relevant to wisdom, not because knowledge is unimportant, because everybody knows the centrality of knowledge to wisdom. That's why we're spending so much time on getting knowledge in this course. But everybody pretty much also understands that wisdom is something above and beyond scientific, theoretical, propositional knowledge. Okay, so that's sort of easily understandable. He also, like I said, he invokes Sophia, and talks about it in sort of connection with contemplation, and phronesis and practical wisdom. He zeroes in, like Schwartz and Sharp, on phronesis. I think that's, again, a little bit too much of a neglect of the important role of Sophia. He also draws on Polanyi's idea of tacit knowledge. Remember, we talked about that when we talked about subsidiary awareness. And he talks about the tacit knowledge having to do with our procedural abilities. It's relevant to attaining goals. It's not explicitly taught. We experience it intuitively. And so he is invoking all kinds of important aspects about implicit learning, intuition, and procedural knowing. I think that's good. I think he needs to also add to that techne. What are some important psychotechnologies, especially since I think, in fairness, say that he is trying to engineer such psychotechnologies in his pedagogical endeavors. I also think he needs to try to do what Aristotle did, which is integrate how phronesis, which is largely happening in an implicit, intuitive, sort of S1 kind of fashion, is integrated with Sophia, which can have a more reflective, perhaps a more S2 aspect to it. All right, that being said, what's the core theory? Well, the idea is and this is important because it's just sort of directly invoked, right? He invoked the tacit knowledge is also, right, it's used as a way of, he starts talking about it as tacit understanding. So the tacit knowing, the implicit learning is also a way in which Sternberg tries to invoke the capacity for understanding. Now, that isn't very well explicated in the account. I'm thinking, I'm speculating, that what I think he's trying to get at is that the machinery by which we sort of grasp the significance of our knowledge and use it to directly and intuitively cope with the world is a significant component of understanding. So I think that's why the shift is there. He then talks, and the reason why I want to invoke that is because what the tacit understanding is doing, it's again so pregnant with aspects of relevance realization. Because he talks about the understanding guiding our ability to adapt to, listen to that language, to adapt to situations, to shape them, and that doesn't necessarily mean physical, it can mean how we construe them, how we formulate our problems, and the selection of environments, the selection, the moving around, the exploring or exploiting. This is all very much doing with relevance realization. He talks about these abilities are needed to deal with practical problems. This is why he's emphasizing wisdom not as the same thing as theoretical knowledge. He's picking up on the same point that Monica Ardell did. But he said, these practical problems, quote, are unformalized or in need of I misquoted, and that misquotation was an important mistake. These problems are unformulated, much more relevant to problem formulation, are unformulated or in need of reformulation. And so he's invoking problem formulation here. He's, of course, with the notion of reformulation, he's invoking the notion of insight. And so we can see, again, the relevance realization machinery being invoked. So his theory, quote, his theory involves, quote, views. Let me start that again. His theory, quote, views wisdom as inherent in the interaction between an individual and a situational context. It's inherently transjective. It's about fitting. In fact, he then goes on to say, wisdom depends on the fit of a wise solution to its context. So notice the fittedness, right? All of the language that we've developed is being directly invoked, is being put at the center of the theory. And I'm going to argue that what he's invoking when he's invoking balance is he's invoking optimization. And I've, of course, argued that relevance realization is an optimization theory. So what's sort of beautiful about the theory is he gives a schematic diagram of it, and I'll draw this for you. So here's our tacit understanding. That's that implicit processing, etc. Remember we talked about that so much in connection with flow. And what's happening is it is dealing with trying to balance your interests. Right, balance your interests, what you're interested in, what you find salient, important. And he talks about three kinds. There's the intrapersonal, the interpersonal, and the extrapersonal. So this, of course, is interest between people. This is interest within a person. So you can think of Plato here trying to get your various centers and what they're interested in coordinated together, and extrapersonal. Having to do, I think this is ultimately how you're connected to yourself, how you're connected to other people, and how you're connected to the world. I think he's invoking, at least implicitly, the three dimensions of connectedness that go into meaning in life. And so I think at least implicitly we can make a clear argument here that he's trying to connect wisdom to meaning in life. Okay? And that this capacity for sort of zeroing in on relevant information is playing an important role in that. And the reason why I say that is because it's not clear to me why the arrows only go one way. It seems to me that well, this is a criticism I would make. I think the arrows, right, should go both ways because there's also going to be feedback. But anyways, they feed forward to the three things that are clearly, I would argue, are, which is, right, the adapting, the shaping, and the selecting. I'll come back to that notion. The triangles are meant to indicate balance, and I've tried to indicate to you that I think I'll put that down here, and we'll come back to it. That balance has to do with optimization. Okay, so what's going on here is, right, this is a balance of your response to, right, the environmental context. So this is balancing your interests, and this is balancing your response. Okay, like I said, that's pretty clear, our relevance realization stuff. This then is directed towards, he argues, the common good. Here again is where I have to step aside from the value he's articulating and the theory he's generating. I agree, especially within a liberal democratic framework, deeply influenced by Christianity, that the common good is an overarching value for us. I'm not sure that that is going to be universally shared by all people who I think can reasonably be deemed wise individuals. So if you're in a culture that's what this means, maybe you have to bend this so much then it's then trivial. It doesn't mean, maybe it doesn't mean common in the sense of shared by everyone. It might be, you're in some sort of hierarchical feudal society and the common good isn't that everybody equally benefits from it. It might be more that everybody is working well together, some sort of justification like that. I'm not trying to justify a hierarchical society or anything like that. I want you clearly to understand, I think this is an important value. I'm just concerned here that Sternberg is being anachronistic here, and he's using one of our central values and attributing it to every person who has been wise. I'm not sure. I think you could make a case that that's clearly the case in Jesus or the Buddha, Not sure that it's the case for Marcus Aurelius and all of the Stoics. It's clearly not the case for Epictetus. So I'm hesitant about putting that up there. I'm going to advise that there's something I think more broadly comprehend. I think the things that we should put up here are things that there's already a consensus on, a broader notion of virtue. Oh, sorry. That really makes it sound like I'm making an emphasis here, right? That what we're really concerned with is virtue, right? And because of this, I think, and meaning in life. Okay, I have changed. That is not in his model. I have changed it because of, again, I'm worried that his particular term is anachronistic and idiosyncratic to our particular historical, cultural context. It's important to also note that running alongside of this is values and then arrows that are kind of indeterminately pointing. So trying to interpret what that means is something like the wise person is being constrained by values. What those values are not clear. Again, is it that we're talking about things like meaning in life and the virtues? Perhaps. So another criticism I have is that this part of the theory, this part of the diagram, the way it's operating is unclear. It might be something as basic as the wise person is working normatively. They're trying to get the best, and then this is not that interesting a claim because wisdom is itself a normative notion, and therefore the fact that the wise person is being governed by normativity is almost definitional. If it means something specific, like the wise person has a specific set of values, that needs to be explicated and defended. So I don't know quite what to do with that. So I have to sort of leave it somewhat inert. What I would argue, and I think what these triangles indicate, and what the language indicates, is the balance is used to adapt, shape, and select environments. And what is this balance? He argues it's something like Piaget's equilibration between assimilation and accommodation. He argues that it's a balance between coping with novelty and proceduralization. Do you see what the balance here is? It's balance that is directly invoking a lot of the machinery we've talked about relevance realization, and he's clearly not invoking sort of a spatial balancing. He's invoking optimization. So I think this theory is also a theory that is deeply integratable with a lot of the material we've been discussing. Relevance realization is playing a key role in terms of the balancing and this process here, also down here at the level of grasping the significance, at least intuitively, of our knowledge and the patterns we've picked up from the environment. There's deep connections to, or at least there's a real potential in Sternberg's theory for making deep connections to meaning in life, because, as I said, I think this is pretty clearly how you connect to yourself, how do you connect to others, how do you connect to the world, right? There's important possible connections, possibly, I'm unsure, between this and virtue and meaning in life. So this is all very good. And like I said, overall, this is clearly a dynamic optimization, and it's invoking something very much like relevance realization. All right. What are some of criticisms? Well, I'll leave that on the board for now. What are some of the criticisms of Sternberg? This is still, in the end, a product theory. It's not a process theory. It doesn't make the sort of, this avoids equating wisdom with expertise, and that's a powerful advantage of this theory. but there, like I said, this domain, the values, unexplicated, it could either be a somewhat trivial because it's almost tautological that the wise person is acting according to normative standards, or it could be a much more controversial claim that specific values are involved. I don't know. I've already told you I don't think that the common good is the goal of all wise people. That seems anachronistic to me in an important way. The theory could clearly be improved by getting clearer about the nature of tacit implicit learning, getting clearer about optimization, getting clearer about relevance realization, getting clearer about how relevance realization connects to meaning in life. So all of those things would be developed if one started to develop a process theory and not just a product theory. So Sternberg needs an independent theory of foolishness. Now he has a theory of foolishness, but it's not independent. His theory of foolishness is basically, foolishness is an imbalance in these things. So what foolishness is basically a lack of wisdom. And again, while that's definitionally the case, what you need is an independently constructed theory of wisdom. A theory of foolishness. You need a theory of foolishness that takes in hand, right, the centrality of seeing through illusion and into reality, that has an independent account of how we're self-deceptive, how we're self-destructive, how that operates, how that unfolds, because we see that in many of the ancient wisdom theories, and how we can ameliorate that. So I think that is missing in a central way from Sternberg's work. Okay, so I think in the end, what I want to do is try and draw all of these together. I've tried to indicate important points of improvement, from one theory with respect to the other, relative strengths and weaknesses. I've also tried to indicate powerful points of convergence and connection to the ideas of relevance realization that we've been developing in this course, because that's part of the big plausibility diagram, to show how the machinery of relevance realization, right, can help to explain what it is to be wise and help to explain, as I'm going to argue, what it is to become wise, to give a processing theory. So we want to take that up in the next account. And I'm somewhat hesitant about that because you know, I'm sort of okay with, you know, offering you proposals. Well, I'm not. I mean, I'm very cautious about proposals about consciousness and other things like that. But, you know, we've got proposals about higher states of consciousness and insight and that. And I've tried to make arguments for that. And I'm going to make an argument that I have made with Leo Ferraro about wisdom. But there is something, it borders on hubristic to talk about this in that way. But I'm going to try and draw on this and at least show you a plausible way in which we can draw all of this material together with the theory of relevance realization and come up with an account of wisdom. And then I think also subject that theory, at least the version that was published in 2013, to some important criticisms. And then hopefully then be in a place where we can fold it back into the connections between wisdom, the cultivation of wisdom, the cultivation of meaning in life, the cultivation, the pursuit, are these the right verbs, of enlightenment, how these are all connected, and how that can be situated into the larger project of awakening from the meaning crisis. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Meow, 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 meow. Rough, rough, rough. Rough, rough, rough. Rough, 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 rough. Yeah.
All right, so John's criticism of our Delt.
Yes.
So he feels like she doesn't incorporate an account of transcendence.
She does not.
So
There's no
lacking
theory
the
or account
process
of the
theory.
transformative experience.
Yeah.
So it doesn't give us a process theory. It at least points us to a process theory, though. It doesn't account for foolishness either.
Yeah, it points towards it, but doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't.
And
yeah.
then there's an untapped potential in this idea of connecting meaning in life with ideas of wisdom and virtue. So I love how Vervaeke is so careful in trying not to speak down about his fellow scientists.
Well, yeah.
So he recognizes there's an untapped potential here, is the way he puts it, and I think that's
particularly since
really
his
thoughtful of him.
intent is combining all these theories into his own theories and other theories to get a better theory.
And he knows he's standing on the shoulders of giants and working in the present with many colleagues on trying to finally finish this process of developing a theory of wisdom. So grasping, right? Grasping how grasping points to relevance realization. Ardelt points this out. The agape, the participatory aspect of relevance realization comes out in her theory. Coming to know self and the world differently through the transformative process. And then, of course, there's the perspectival. So we have the cognitive aspects, the affective aspects, and then what was that third one? The perspectival, which covers the
Cognitive, reflective, or
the reflective
and
okay.
agapic.
Yep. So the perspectival covers that reflective, and then we get to Robert Sternberg on the history of the psychology of wisdom, all the work that he's done, plus how he's helped connect this with
theories of wisdom
with actual teaching, with education, with pedagogy. Yeah. So,
and that's what pedagogy means is the teaching.
So 1998, his theory, A Balanced Theory of Wisdom, is released. And he focuses a lot on Sophia, phronesis, and
the key word being balance. Even though
and the balance between
so
them.
one thing though Vervaeke does critique though is he still focuses a little too much on the phronesis and neglects the Sophia aspect of it as well.
He also includes an epistemological, how do you say that?
Epistemological.
Epistemological, you did it. When you do it without thinking, it works. So he talks about episteme as wellness theory, but he drops that early on because, everybody studying the theory already knows the centrality of knowledge, So episteme as in education, gained knowledge, but also recognizes the above and beyond necessity of the practice of transformative practices. So he neglects Sophia somewhat. He does zero in a lot on phronesis. He's not going to the expert fallacy.
Yeah. He introduces us.
So he recognizes procedural knowing.
Yeah. Which is the tacit knowledge.
The tacit knowledge.
So what he calls
highlights.
tacit knowledge is, knowledge on the periphery. It's procedural, intuitive. It just happens.
So how phronesis integrates with Sophia.
Vervaeke thinks he should add some new psychotechnologies and needs to add Sophia back into this.
More of it, yeah.
So his theory is invoke the idea that tacit knowledge is a way of understanding. So the machinery of knowledge is significant.
It covers how we grasp.
Yeah,
he's trying to use this, Vervaeke thinks, to cover how we grasp significance. So it appears that he is, again...
relevance realization. It's kind of like
relevance.
It happens
so Vervaeke's theory of relevance realization, again, ties all of these different theories up that we see from all of these different masters studying, the theory of wisdom and trying to figure out how to explain it.
Yeah, so
here we are. So relevance realization, how it guides, so the tacit understanding or tacit knowledge guides our ability to adapt to situations, to shape them. And then it also focuses on the selection, the exploring, the exploiting of our environments.
Yeah, and we do this because we need to deal with unformulated problems that need to be formulated.
Yes.
Yet again, there is a need. What was previous episodes? What was it called?
There's a need for insight.
Yeah,
basically.
there's the need for it. Okay.
So Sternberg is recognized and insight is important. So here again, we're seeing, so relevance realization is a theory that Vervaeke puts forward that that attempts to explain how human beings recognize intelligence. This is key to developing wisdom in completing the process of actual AGI.
Well, and also like a theory of how we realize what is relevant.
How humankind
not
does
what
this,
is relevant, but how we
how do
realize
human
what
beings
is relevant. Yeah.
do this. It's something that we've never been able to figure out. It's central to understanding conscious awareness, one of the great problems that mankind has still yet to solve.
Yeah,
so here we are.
So
So relevance realization again is being invoked.
yeah, so balance.
Some kind of machinery that helps us gain insight and realize what is relevant to us in every moment. Because there's infinite knowledge around us. How do you realize what to focus in on? Your awareness could be taken in so much information at once. How do you know where to take your next step in life without having a sense of what is relevant to you at all times? And we do have a sense of relevance.
So in this theory, when
relevance
when we use the word balance, we're meaning optimization. So to bring in vernacular from Vervaeke's previous episodes, and he starts out with tacit understanding, which then moves up into a balancing of interests, and you have your self-interests, your people interests, and then the world around you. So you got your interpersonal interests, your intrapersonal, your self-interest, and then your intrapersonal, how the self interacts with the world.
Your extra-personal.
Extra-personal. And then that moves into your balanced responses. So, your responses to the environment, and you're adapting, you're shaping, and you're selecting.
Yep.
And this
it's all in trade-off relationships.
Yeah. And this response, the response is a response to cope with any given situation or problem, right?
Yep.
And then we come to a contentious word, which is the common good. And Vervaeke doesn't think that.
He might be a little bit off here, Sternberg.
Yeah, well, it may not be applicable to all cultures and all
people and all times and all moments. Yeah,
so,
and wisdom is always context dependent, whilst maintaining some kind of generality to it.
So instead of common good, Vervaeke uses the term virtue and meaning in life. And then...
So the common sense of what is virtuous and a common sense of meaningful, what is meaningful in life is something that human beings also do have. So
and then
that might be the fundamental,
and
perhaps.
Then within this schema, on one side there's values and there's arrows pointing at it, which is kind of unclear for Vervaeke. He's like, what exactly does this mean? It could mean a lot of different things. It could be, the values shape these balances, or you have to have certain values for these balances, or so it's just not clear enough.
It's not clear enough. Yeah. Just tacit understanding, and it's pointing up to the triad of the different balances, the self-interest, the interest in others, and then the interest in the world, the extra-personal, and then how we select, shape, and adapt is another triangle.
Yeah. And that goes towards the common good.
He's saying that all of these should have arrows pointing both ways, back and forth, because they are all interconnecting and interinforming.
Yeah. And so there's some clarity issues with this, but what he is seeing and saying is, this has to do with the optimization of interests and responses of somebody or people's within their environment to enhance virtue and meaning in life. Essentially, like if you were to break it down, you're trying to optimize, not just the interests and the responses, but within the interests and the responses, and because they both affect each other backward and forward. And underlying this is your relevance realization, is your what we're using the word tacit understanding or tacit knowledge.
What Sternberg was using that word for,
So
the tacit understanding, it does seem to point to that sense of what's relevant.
Yeah,
that is almost certainly what I think that he's got that right.
Yeah,
and so this is a good theory, but again, it's still unfortunately it's just a product theory. It's just not a product theory.
And it's not clear.
Yeah. So what is the balance between the coping with novelty and the process of proceduralization that we go through? He certainly is invoking optimization. We recognize relevance realizations playing a key role once again in another theory of wisdom, and the connections to meaning in life are there. So a
Well,
dynamic optimization that points to relativizations, though, is still a product theory, not a process. So he still needs an independent theory of foolishness. We're missing that because you can't
yeah.
just say that. In his account of foolishness, he does give one, Sternberg. He states that it's a lack of wisdom. Well, that's unfortunately a circular definition. You still need to account for what foolishness is in higher detail. And then to draw it all together, to highlight the powerful points of convergence and demonstrate how relevance
Well, I
realization
think that's
helps
what
us cultivate
I
wisdom.
think that's what Vervaeke was saying.
Actually, that's
what he wants
to do with
yeah, not what
next
could be done
Yes.
with this, but what he wants to do is to draw not just this theory, but also the other theories we've been talking about together and combine them with relevance realization to help explain what it is to become wise.
Yes.
To really explain not the what is wisdom, but what it is to become wise.
Yes, and
as
how
an
to
active process.
Yeah, and how to fold that process of becoming wise back in on itself into the cultivation of meaning in life, deeper meaning in life, and the pursuit of enlightenment to increase our self-transcendence, our self-transformation.
And also do it in a way that is
in a way that is going to be bountiful and helpful,
well, and
engaging
also,
for others.
and also be applicable throughout time and
Yes.
beyond time and beyond culture and beyond
Yes.
personal sentiment.
Mm-hmm.
So something that is, regardless of where you come from, what you are, anything, it is still can be applied.
So it's transculturally.
Well, kind of like, science, like certain aspects, like if you build a certain machine and you build it the right way, it doesn't matter what language you speak or
it's useful.
yada, yada, where you are. It does the thing it's supposed to do.
Yeah. If it does the thing better than the previous things that the other, whatever culture has, then it's something that, of course, any culture is going to want to adopt. Yeah.
Yeah. So, smithing with iron, and is better than, now that we know how to smith with iron, and if you learn how to smith with iron, you're going to have something that's better than just a stone axe or a stone hammer. It just works. All you have to do is learn the process of it and start to apply it. And ultimately, too, this is going to be used to create a responsible AI that's not going to turn us all into paper clips or, whatever it is. So it's like it has to even work with something that's so completely alien, which artificial intelligence is completely alien to human intelligence. Where fleshy organisms, it is silica and electrons and
numbers.
Thinks in, we have 4 dimensions if you include time. A computer could be capable of thinking simultaneously in, I don't know, infinite dimensions.
And it does it all in 0 and 1s somehow.
Yeah, or at some point in time we'll go beyond 0 and 1s.
The qubits.
And probably even beyond that, but, such is the nature of science. It always goes further than we thought. If you look at the old magazines from back in the science magazines from way, way, way back when, if like, what would it be like in the year 2000? There's like, like people flying personal dirigibles that are the size of surfboards, and they think we have all this, but there's no realization of the cell phone. They'd be like, yeah, you got a TV in your car where you can talk face to face with somebody. It's like, yeah, I got a tablet. I got a phone that opens up into a tablet that I can do that on.
Yeah.
That can also do everything else.
Our physical evolution got us this far, so hopefully our spiritual evolution can get us to the next level and help us survive with the level of intelligence and technological capacity that we have these days, because we got some double-edged swords around us, and they're quite mighty, and we're not so great at wielding them wisely. So that's the name of the game, fam. What are we going to do to help ameliorate this meaning crisis? What can we do beyond the hacking of limbs and the mere treating of symptoms? How do we get to the root of this issue?
Yeah,
how do we help ourselves and those around us that we care and love about? Have love for. How do we help ourselves and everybody awaken from the meaning crisis?
Yeah.
How do we do it? How are we going to do it? I think we're going to do it in some really beautiful ways. There's going to be a lot of creativity that is going to come waterfalling and unfurling out of the world, out of a lot of people. I think we're going to see some bright points of light start sparking up all over the place, and our ingenuity, our creative capacity, music,
Sorry,
art.
the imagery I got for that was, like you're dark in the woods, and then you just see a bunch of lighters light up, and then the cherries, joints everywhere, bright sparks of light.
Well, I think there will be some deep social, cultural realizations that we're going to have in groups, and some of those will happen at cultural events like festivals on large scales, where groups of people are solving deep and difficult problems within themselves, also within a group context, and maybe some kind of argument happens, and
Well,
then in the wider
that's where we're going to have to be careful.
town,
as
city,
to be
state, nation
responsible,
level, and then now global level that we're on, we're going to have to learn to have these conversations.
Yeah, but when we start getting out in the world and getting people together to do that, we need to be a lot more responsible than we were the last time we did it with the whatever cultural revolution and the hippies and all that stuff, because there are things that we know now that we can avoid, and we should. Like festivals are nice and everything, but there's a reason why we can't just love each other and live in tents in a field. You know what I mean?
Yeah, forever, right? Yeah. And then run all the music and the lighting and everything off of gasoline generators, or diesel.
But it's still growing pains, all that, accepting responsibility as one gathers the ability to respond.
Hindsight's 2020, and I think the hippies did as well as they could, considering the mass understanding of humanity at that point in history. Oh, dude, yeah. I mean, there's some incredible ideas that came out of the 60s and 70s, and they're still sweeping around the world today. AA, it was one thing that came out of that. If you guys don't know, the founder of AA developed that theory during an acid trip in the middle of the night.
Came to God
and came into a deep realization of how to formulate a process to help people maintain abstinence from something that they have realized that they don't have control over. So they learn to choose not and give over their need to the higher being of their own understanding.
And then they give them a token for everything. And what the token is it symbolizes something that has way more meaning than you can just say.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's the communal aspect of it, and the learning to be open and honest and sharing, honest with oneself and with a group of people. And then that helps you be able to manifest that in the wider world. We got, of course, the ideas of agape were very strong during the hippie movement, peace and love. The anti-war movement was very strong. Civil rights.
I think there was a bit of a confusion between philia, eros, and agape at some points in time.
Oh, yeah.
Drugs will do that to
all
you, right?
through the different aspects of love were certainly being confused during that time. Yeah, the free love thing didn't work out so well.
Yeah, that, and also, what it is to have, the friendship, the
filial love,
filial love and the agapic love, to be able to, because sometimes, like ultimately you'd want to get to agape, but first you have to start with a fraternity, a family, like a grouping of people that knows each other.
We really did have to learn how to love again, though, because we had, and I mean, the hippies are known for being nature loving, and it's because we had we became disconnected from Earth and our relationship with the life cycle of this planet.
Well, right before that,
so there was kind of a longing, a calling to go back.
Time, like that was the age of make everything out of plastic, go to convenience as way too far, and what am I saying now? We wrap organic fruit in plastic. But anyway.
Oh yeah, big chain grocery stores and everything. All that stuff just started in the early 1900s. And it wasn't that long after it that there's the 60s. And they're like, oh my gosh, we're becoming materialistic. So they go headlong in the other direction to the extreme.
And even
beyond we do that. We overcorrect, but the pendulum swings and it rebalances. And
which, is funny because there's so during that period of time as well, in the East, there was communism, which is also a materialistic mindset as well. But it's a materialistic mindset that looks after, the issue with this idea with the common good is it has been subverted to this idea, but it's still material. Marx was a materialist.
Materialist indeed.
And it was just no time for the sacred life or anything like that. It's all the material, and how well something works can just be observed through the data and how much resource goes here or there. And if you just fix the material needs of the masses, they'll be happy. But
well, how do you do that? To have the to have your highest good as the common good and to care for all the masses, they ended up killing hundreds of thousands, millions of people. You can't, dwindle the population down to say 10 or 20% of its initial size, or even if it's just 50% of its initial size, just like hundreds of millions of people, to be able to make it more equal.
Yeah,
that's so the highest good can't be the common good, because the common good could be the idea of a dictator to a mass genocide to make a smaller number of people be able to be forced to live at an equal level. But so we came up with the idea of meritocracy here in the U.S. to try and figure out a fair way.
Oh, well, and actually beyond,
of allowing people upward mobility, but also to earn as well as much as you're willing to work.
This country was built on the idea of, even flawed as it was back then, merit. But so, the issue on both sides of the planet at this period of time, whether it be consumerism or socialism, communism, whichever sect of socialism you want, it was materialistic and paid no mind to the human spirit. The humans strive for wisdom and connection in that way. In the consumerist end, you can fill a lot of holes and voids in feeling temporarily with buying things that come in plastic that are dropped off right at your door. But you're still neglecting something. Whereas saying communism, you can make everybody equal and no one above anybody else, but that's just the physical things, and you're not even meeting the physical needs at that point.
Right.
But still, it was just only looking at the material opposed to, because we're not just material beings. If we were, we wouldn't have this drive to become more and to worship and to formulate religion and look out into the stars,
we wouldn't have a sense of wonder or the capacity for agape, unconditional love, people can actually have. No matter what your kid does, you still love it.
And it's hard doing science in that realm, because that's it's hard to measure. It's hard to find a measure of what is wise, what is wisdom, what is the process of wisdom. It's not something you can put in a beaker or stick a ruler next to. You need another kind of beaker or ruler that we haven't come up with, and we don't have the psychotechnology for it yet, or we haven't combined the psychotechnologies we've had in an optimized machine, if you will, yet. That's reliable, iterated over multiple instances throughout time,
for regardless people.
So but
we're getting there, trial by error. We've made a lot of mistakes along the way. We've run a lot of experiments, and we're learning more and more how to actually commune, conversate, work together, dialogue. And Vervaeke's now engaging in a process called dialogos. He's hoping to resurface a lost capacity that human beings have, which is the ability to solve problems that we could never solve by ourselves together. And so we can actually work kind of like a hive mind, the human, and we've all actually experienced a little bit of this in our lives at some points, to where you're on a deep conversation with someone else or multiple people, and all of a sudden something happens to where you're all just kind of talking without thinking about it anymore. All your ideas are adding up, and you're figuring something out together that you never could have figured out by yourself. And there's a logos that comes about. There's something fundamental about our awareness that transcends all of us, that can come about, say it's you and I talking, a third personality enters the room that is both of us. And so human consciousness can upgrade itself and work in kind of a hive mind kind of way, but we've lost this practice. We've lost all knowledge almost of this practice, besides what Plato talks about, and in the procedural knowledge of how to do it, because we haven't been doing it for generations. So all we have is the theoretical knowledge, is we can read about it and we can understand it, but we don't have the practice. You need to ride a bike for a while to get good at it. If you keep on riding for a long time, you might become a pro BMX mountain biker or something like that, right? We have not been practicing this for 2,000 years in earnest, and we need to bring it back. And once we do, we can start. And Vervaeke, if you go to his channel on YouTube, you'll see him engaging in what he terms dialogos with other people, and they actually demonstrate this kind of hive mind process.
The generation of logos through a dialogue, you know, and a dialogue is literally logging of. So dialogue between two individuals is the logging of ideas through two individuals. The method he has is, or the method that is practiced with these groups of individuals is a way where everybody has a role that helps. Well, one person literally logs, but then helps create a logos out of just the dialogue itself. So it's not just dialogue, but also is something that create
and almost a person.
Word generative mechanism, if you will, that you can participate in. It's worth looking into. It's interesting. Yes, they do a little bit of appreciation prayers in the beginning, but it helps set your head straight. So
yeah, a little meditation to ground oneself in the sense of presence. And it does require a certain amount of self-awareness and having dissolved identification and attachment to the ego.
I think that's the goal of the roles that you play.
Certainly is the goal.
It's like,
and that's why you take on those positions, those different roles.
And then they shift.
It helps counteract that.
What is it? It's
the egoic disposition.
It's like the presenter of the whatever problem they're all trying to work on, and then the person receiving it, trying to understand it. That relationship of those two interlocutors. Then there's the scribe who is keeping track of things, and then there's the herald that points out the not so obvious thing that they're all kind of dancing around that the group may have not seen yet. And then every so often, once an understanding comes, it shifts.
Yes.
And then one becomes the other, becomes the other, becomes the other, and that helps.
And you're putting forth an idea.
Ego personalize.
Yes.
So you can be like, well, at this point in time, I am the scribe. That's what I'm doing right here.
It's really clever how it's built into it to help us maintain that egolessness as much as possible.
Because
all you're doing is you're putting forth an idea that you're not entirely sure about. This is your basic idea of it, but this is as far as I've gotten.
And then the person you're just telling it to takes over, and everybody switches places.
So if we take this process and aim it at the greatest challenges that we face as a human species, we might actually be able to eke our way through the needle. And it certainly seems like we're at one of those eye of the needle moments.
Well, if you take the eye of a needle and you stick it really close to your eye, you can see everything through it. I'm just saying. You just got to get close to it.
That's deep. That's deep.
There's occasional deepness in the shallow.
So you're saying that we need to shrink ourselves to crawl through or just get really close?
Well, the closer you get to the problem, well, that's the thing, there's problems that seem so far away, but the more you get into them, you're literally getting closer to them, bringing them into yourself to understand them, then seeing through them into reality, right?
Yeah, we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel or the eye of the needle very well because we are far away from it. But if we can somehow get ourselves close enough to it that the spin boon, we bend and the spoon.
Bend.
Yeah. Whew, wow. I was in the matrix there for a moment and I got discombobulated. So, yeah, you're not trying to bend the spoon. You're bending yourself. So the idea of the self needs to be transcended for us to get through the eye of the needle as a species. And a lot more people on this planet need to awaken. I don't know that we need to awaken to the level of the Buddha or Jesus.
Well, that's the other end of the closer you get to the needle, the more you can see through the eye as well. So as the problems get closer and the results of the problems get closer and closer to more and more people and get closer into their lives, the more that they can see the problem, yes. But if they choose to see through it and see what can come out of it.
Yeah.
And that's where it's also
I think that's what we need. We need billions of eyes to look at that needle at the same time to get it into enough focus for the species. The whole species as a whole to understand.
It's kind of happening, we're realizing that
and then we are the whole.
Yeah. A whole loaf.
Whole loaf.
It's like we're kind of like a
whole meatloaf.
A package of the Hawaiian rolls. They all start out as one loaf, but you can rip them apart. And you can consume them. All right, I'm getting silly.
We truly are just one loaf of many pieces.
Yes.
Facets of the same crystal. The light shines through every face uniquely. All right, fam. This has been a good one. We are down to 5 more.
Oh, my goodness.
That's it. The last 5. the next episode is on the nature of wisdom. What does he mean by nature? Oh, we're getting into it. I'm stoked, fam. I hope you guys are excited as we are. And if you're just running into us here, welcome to Meaning Making 101. We've been following John Vervaake's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. If you've enjoyed any of this whatsoever, make sure that you get over there on John Vervaake's channel. It's linked in the description. Smash the like and subscribe for the man. He deserves to be heard by as many people as possible. And check out his channel. There's a lot more going on there. There's meditation, teaching, there's Tai Chi, there's Dialogos sessions, there's wisdom. He's now got another series following this Awakening series called Beyond Socrates. So how can we actually enact the hope we wish to see in the world now that we've accumulated all this knowledge? Now how do we get into the process of it, the participatory and the procedural aspects of it? And that's going to be really, really awesome, I think that's going to help this planet a lot if even a small fraction of us tune into it, because we'll start to ripple out a new way of being that will all of a sudden you'll start to see come out in video games and movies and art and music and in our culture.
Yep.
And we will shift. We will change the trajectory that we are on. And instead of flying off and down a cliff, we will soar. We will launch off into outer space and beyond, both inner and outer, forever, in peace.
Meow.
Love you guys. It's been a good one. We will see you next time. Look for us next Wednesday. It looks like 7 o'clock is going to be the time that is working for us now. So look for us 7 p.m. EST every Wednesday right here on Facebook, Twitch, or YouTube. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and if you also would like to listen to this podcast without using up all your bandwidth, you can always listen to the podcast on all the major podcast networks. So we're everywhere: Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, all of those. Look us up. We're on Google and the rest. And you can go ahead and throw some ratings down on iTunes, and Spotify as well would be very helpful. So thank you guys so much. We love you all. We will see you next time.